We're going to have two sets of questions, just a quick couple questions in the beginning to get a sense of some typical sound politic issues. Then we're going to have some general questions which really give you a chance to tell us your story. The kind of answers we're looking for are specific answers. We don't want candidates coming here and saying we like the environment, we like creating jobs. We want to know what specifically you're going to do that sets you apart from the other candidates, how you plan to accomplish, making the environment better.
As specific as we can be, I guess. So, yeah.
So to start, we were curious if you supported the Parks Levy and if you supported the 2008 Sound Transit Expansion Proposition 1.
Yes, both. Yes to both.
So our first question's one that's had a lot of controversy in the press recently, and that's eliminating the head tax. Do you support eliminating the head tax? Are you opposed to it? If so, why or why not?
I do support eliminating the head tax to our Seattle business community. I'm a small business owner myself, and I realize the challenges that come with doing business here in the city of Seattle. Of my 20 years of being a small business owner, we've had a location here in the Seattle area for 4 years, and I've had real life experience in dealing with some of the challenges, especially before startup business operations. So I think eliminating the head tax would be a wonderful thing.
And in terms of the revenue that's going to be lost, we have the pedestrian master plan. Less than 1% of those projects are being funded. This is $4 million in transportation funding. There's no sign that we're going to see this money come back from anywhere. There's no sidewalks in the city. How the heck are we going to get sidewalks? Where are you going to make up this money? Who are you going to tax? Do you care?
Yeah,
what are we going to do?
Well, it definitely has to be a step-by-step incremental approach. I think by creating a more favorable business environment in Seattle will, in turn, attract more businesses to Seattle. Right now, we're losing that competitive battle and edge many, many times, and probably more often than not in this economic downturn, to our surrounding suburban cities that surround us here in Puget Sound. It's a very competitive environment, and Seattle has to be on the leading edge of being competitive, and eliminating the head tax would be one of those things that would greatly attract more businesses to Seattle to make up for that budget shortfall.
And so we just want to clarify, this isn't picking on you, we just want to make sure our sidewalks are getting funded. Your way of funding sidewalks is kind of like trickle-down economics. We're cutting taxes, we think jobs are going to come because there's no longer this $25 tax.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
We're just cutting that one particular tax.
Right.
I think that can be more than made up by the additional businesses that we will attract.
Okay. Going along with transportation issues, tell us your thoughts on the transportation budget. In your plan for the city, how are you going to solve the transportation issues that the city has? What would your budget look like if you were to make a pie and divide it up in percentages? Where would we see the shift? Are you going to fund, make sure the potholes are done? Are you going to invest more in buses? And it's one thing to say you're going to do both of those, but where do you think the big problem is, and we need to make some serious change compared to what's the mayor's doing now?
Yeah, good question. And I haven't given much thought to how to divvy up the pie. I look at, as we approach our issues here in Seattle in regards to transportation, as a big picture that we have to address and move forward to getting on top of step by step. Of course, we all want sidewalks, we all want pothole repair, but we also, I think, in this time that we find ourselves, have to make sure that we invest and continue to reinvest in our infrastructure and keeping our roads and highways and bridges and byways up to standard, up to speed. So I would like to see the priority go towards that.
James, I wanted to ask a follow-up question to back up a little bit, if I may. Was that in your questionnaire you had mentioned that we've lost some businesses, small businesses, to locations outside the city, maybe suburbs.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, like, what businesses are those? I've heard this cited oftentimes, and I'm just not familiar with which businesses we're losing.
I don't think it's any particular industry. I'm in physical therapy and fitness business, so a health-related industry for ourselves. We have a location outside of Seattle, and it's much easier to do business there. We've had many locations outside of Seattle over the 20 years that we've been in business. And I know of many, many, many small business owners who face similar challenges and opt to implement that alternative or that choice of moving outside the city. I'm a longtime member of the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce, which represents almost 2,000 businesses throughout the Greater Puget Sound. And so many of those businesses are outside of Seattle. I've been vice chair of small business. I've been working with quite a few of these businesses. So I see firsthand knowledge of many businesses electing not to do business here in the city any longer because it's so challenging. And other cities are luring our business space away, especially our small business space, and we have to be cautious and proactive in keeping them here.
I know one challenge is my family actually runs a small business and once operated in the city of Seattle and now operates in Renton, actually. But the primary reason for them, I think, had to do more with real estate rather than taxation. They're just the availability of commercial buildings and warehouse buildings were better down in Renton. So, how would you address just the basic concern of having physical plant? Should you change the uses of some land to allow construction of more?
Well, to address the first part of that, there are many reasons why people would choose to move outside and do business elsewhere than Seattle. Real estate prices are much lower outside of Seattle. Commercial space is much cheaper to lease outside of Seattle, and so employing employees and hiring employees and creating living wage jobs is less expensive to do so outside of Seattle. And then also dealing with our tax structure here in Seattle, it's much more expensive. Parking and all the rest of those things to do business, utility rates and all the rest of that. So I would look at trying to work with those different types of tax structures that we have in place. The city version of the B&O tax, the head tax, the square footage tax. Maybe create some kind of incentive plan to actively recruit new businesses to Seattle, and make sure that we are proactive in bringing new business about here. So every business owner has a different story of why he or she elects either to do business here or elsewhere, and that's their freedom of choice that they can enact any time. We have to be competitive with the rest of the region. We have a tremendous amount of commercial vacancy space opening up in Seattle now, and with that we need to take advantage of that opportunity to make sure that those vacancies, those spaces are out there in a competitive market, in a competitively priced market, so we can fill those vacancies.
Another transportation question, somewhat controversial again. Do you support expanding the streetcar network?
It's not my number one priority of things, but I think in the greater overall picture, as we look 5, 10, 15 years out, yes, adding a streetcar and expanding the streetcar network throughout the city of Seattle would be something that we definitely want to do and take a look at. I think it only adds to our ability to transport folks around efficiently, and also it aids to the beauty of our city to have a network of streetcars that connect the various neighborhoods around Seattle.
Seattle's a growing city, and so when you have residents coming in, there needs to be density. Where are you going to put that density? Where are you going to prevent that density from going?
Mm-hmm. Well, my way of leading and being part of a team is by informing and educating people. One of the things that we have to make sure that all of us in the Puget Sound realize is that the projected growth here in the Seattle metropolitan area is over 1 million people over the next 20 years. So the questions are, where are we going to house them, how are we going to feed them, where are we going to employ them, how are we going to transport them around safely, effectively, efficiently. When it comes to housing, my ideal is to make sure that the city works closely with our neighborhoods and our communities throughout town. Each one of our neighborhoods has a distinct flavor to it as far as design, architect, ambiance, and the whole works. And we need to preserve a lot of that, if not most, if not all of that, as best we can. But we also need to plan smartly and effectively and efficiently for future growth and for density that fits in within the current look, current design, current feel of the various neighborhoods around town. I think the neighborhood should have some say, but I also think they need to be prepared that we will grow. There's no stopping the growth that's coming to Seattle over the next 20 years. But we want to grow smartly, and we want to grow collaboratively together.